The Day It Happened by Karlos Kowaleski. Read by Phil Reynolds. Part 1. During daytime hours of the year 2353, when alluring reverie marshals one's eyesight high and westward, one can sometimes see the earth's moon, a pale half-thumbprint blemishing the heavens. Dotted macula and long striated gorges enchant the porcelain white surface that dissolves seamlessly into the blanket of a blue sky. It has been 384 years since man first ruffled the moon's surface, and terrestrial Earth now resembles the lush, greener state of its former self from many million years prior. This moon is accompanied by a new star that has been discovered in the east. A bright dot that is visible at the same level of illumination at dusk, dawn, and in the black of night. On these clear summer days, the moon and new star are the only visual anchors by which an explorer could refine direction of travel beyond basic measurements of the sun. A thick canopy of trees created a wholly protective shell around the planet and its creatures. When peering outside the safety of shade, there loomed utterly massive tears in the Earth's atmosphere, through which physical blades of scorching, heated light burned all it touched. All precipitation on the planet was contained exclusively between the interior of the canopy and the forest floor, an entirely isolated ecosystem. Navigating the forest terrain is an expansively slow procedure. The overgrowth of vegetation on the woodland floor shows no wear-paths from recent travel. In fact, no explorer of the camp has ever encountered evidence of mass migrations, so they walk carefully as to not leave marks of their own. 87 people travel, single file, with carefully placed steps so as to not displace a single creature of the earth. Having only encountered human beings twice in the last 20 years, members of the tribe presumed man to not be an essential component of nature, and therefore tried to leave as little of a mark on the earth as possible. Upon being startled, and with a coded whistle from the leader of the march, the entire group would drop to the ground, blending in with the brush and tree roots. They would bury their dead under pyres of rocks in the riverbeds, as to hide their existence altogether, leaving their mortal remains to the fish and decay. This incessant behaviour of hiding from nature's eye was learned through generations prior, but the impetus had been lost entirely. The camp numbers break down as such. 10 explorers lead the camp and are responsible for hunting, scouting dangers, and discovering and gathering resources. 44 camp custodians who cook, clean, sew, make and repair tools, and build fires. 22 unassigned, mostly children. The unassigned help where needed and are temporarily between stations of responsibility as directed by the elders. 7 medicine men. 4 elders, one of which looks to be in her early 70s, but is in fact over 300 years old. She is the matriarchal connection to what was. The camp's sociology was composed so many generations previous that one does not know their own ancestry, so they rely on Elder Abigail to answer questions about the past. Abigail's languishing condition in the 3rd century of her life has left her with little energy. For the past 100 years she has only spoken at burials and births, and she is carried by 4 unassigned members of the camp as they traverse the forest floor, always in her earth-wrapped chair, enclosed in fine netting to protect her from errant sticks and insects. At any given time there are always a few pregnancies or deaths looming within the camp. Currently, Rave is the only mother-to-be, and as the new starlight grew over the past few months of her natal gestation, the urgency with which the camp traditionally relocated had increased exponentially. There was, felt among the group, void of any overt reasoning, a need for sturdy, cave-like shelter. With each day the star grew brighter, and this shared feeling was inexplicably agreed upon to be linked to the imminent birth that was so rapidly approaching. Rue and Woe were twin brothers, and were agreed upon to be the strongest explorers of the camp. They were perfectly balanced in speed and climbing skills, and always surveyed as a single unit. The week preceding the birth, Rue and Woe ran ahead of the camp several miles, in search of the tallest trees on a clearing's edge. By climbing to heights unseen, the two brothers could gain a perspective greater than that of their parents or even the rest of their camp, essentially making Rue and Woe the tribe's strongest leaders. They never saw it this way. The twin boys, with matching blonde hair, dressed in the same clothes, were too focused on their duties and just did their job as expected by the camp. Rue was thrilled by the never-ending hunt for new land and its promised bounty. Woe, however, was never comfortable with the idea of constantly pursuing treasure. Woe asked of his brother, "How can you obsess over the spoils of the hunt to such an insatiable degree? I feel you becoming consumed with a desire to find something great out there, as though we are only alive to find an unseen treasure. Year after year I've been next to you, and I've seen that burning in your eyes." Still focused on navigating the two men through the forest terrain, Rue responded without concern for the inquiry, "I don't know if I necessarily think of the spoils in the way you've framed the question. I, as any one person would, hope to find a treasure of lush, open spaces and rolling hills grazed by many animals, near a brook, with a hill. To find an area like that, unscorched by the blades of God, would put us in a position where we could encamp forever, maybe even build into something greater. This is what we've always been looking for." "That's not a good reason to do things, blindly continuing to live the same way things have always been," Woe continued, while holding a branch above his brother's head. "People can always change. You can change everything you are, everything you were. I don't implicitly trust that everything I see and experience is the only possible way. Do you? We can create our own perception of reality and become something unseen." "Where is this coming from?" Rue exclaimed, while the two began climbing a large, diseased tree. "Why dismantle, reconfigure, or reject the system that got us here to this point now? We have everything we need. We have a fully self-sufficient tribe, we have the ability to find food and boil water. Everything we have is well designed and built for successfully reaching the next hunt. So why change that? Why even question that? Because it's just not healthy to continuously perpetuate the way things were. We need a new perspective if we want to continue to grow." Rue scoffed at the sentiment, and his brother continued, "It might be better to try something new, as we have the virtue of self-determination and the ability to look at our world and say, this can be better, if not just different. And different is where the greater discovery comes from." Rue was now starting to show signs of aggravation at his brother's exhortation, and responded with a quick, "Preposterous! Even if we did tear down our very precepts of what it is to be a society, what would we replace it with?" "I don't know," said Woe, "but that's not up to us. That's for the next generation to decide. That world belongs to them. It's the world they get to build up." "I imagine they'll be inconsolably upset and will say, 'I never asked for this anarchy, and it's unfair that I was born into it.'" Rue began to take himself up, thinking he might have the higher ground in the argument. His twin did not see it this way. "Was I not born into this structure? Nobody ever asked me if I wanted to be an explorer. I was raised to be this person by someone else's choosing. I'm inundated in this lifestyle, and obviously so are you." Rue did not like how his brother used the word obviously. "But brother, I love being an explorer. I've worked our entire life to become good at this. Where is this feeling coming from? We've been as close as two brothers could be our entire lives, and everything you're saying now is a betrayal of the tribe's will. I just don't understand why you would want things to become so uprooted and chaotic." Woe now spoke with a softer, more serious tone. "What if we used to be smarter and more capable? What if, throughout the ages, we got too reliant on the way the tribe works, and we've actually lost our sense of innate intelligence? I've been doing a lot of thinking recently, and I'm inclined to believe this very well may be the case. I've arrived at the conclusion that the only way we can truly ascend to the next station of our capability, for the advancement of the civilization as a whole, is to become truly independent of any structure at all. We must simply be. And of course it will be chaotic and uncomfortable, but we have these brains with this knowledge, and I think we'll be all right." "There's no way this will ever work. You're thinking erratically." Both men's heart began to thump heavily in their chest. Woe continued in a more attacking tone. "My ability to think in ways you cannot predict is not a weakness of mine, but of yours. I think that's an important distinction to make. You know you're still dependent on me to help you navigate this frightening world, right?" Woe's head stooped as his brother continued dressing him down. "You've never led a charge into a hunt since that time you almost got trampled. I'm not wrong about that, am I?" Woe shook his head. "I've been protecting your delicate sensibilities for years, and have had to pull you into every battle we've encountered." Woe stared at the branch his feet rested upon for several moments. He saw a large, segmented, plated-backed insect with an innumerable amount of legs scurry under a tuffet of leaves. He thought for a moment about how this was the largest insect he'd ever see, and yet still it appeared small compared to the world around it. This is how Woe felt about his utopian vision after hearing his brother shoot the idea down. Bravely he stood his ground and reminded his brother Rue, "I understand your viewpoint on this issue, but you're not independent either. You're not able to climb without me helping you up, yes? The injuries you sustained in the battle with that massive buck when we were younger left you with torn tendons of the left arm, and I've literally been lifting you up every day since. That's not lost on me, Woe. Speaking of which, help us up. I think I see a path to the top." Upon reaching the interior canopy of trees, the men were careful as to not pull the leaves back too hastily. Caution forbade their excitement from peaking as they held the back of their hands to the leathery, thick leaves, checking for high temperatures. When both minds agreed the chance was favourable, they decided to part the final heavy branches and peek above the tree line. There before them spanned a strange reality that tested both Rue and Woe. As far as the eye could see were not rolling hills, but angular shapes not of this postmodern world. Massive swathes of grass with angles behaving like that of plated armour intersected one another in regular patterns. The mossy knolls, though one could not positively identify them as such, would change from vertical to horizontal angles in instant manipulations of orientation. Some of the hills were objectively cubist in proportion to one another, with many, many rectangular holes covering each surface of the thing. These strange monuments were sleeping adjacent to massive trenches of standing water, stretching out into random and yet somehow regular directions. Animals were abundant, and no blades of physical light could be seen. Woe now understood his brother's dream of the treasured land, and looked into his brother's face, which was now brimming with glee. At the centre of this expansive garrison was a glimmering, almost blinding, dome-shaped structure, reflecting beams of light in kaleidoscopic orientation. "What is that over there?" Woe asked of his brother, as sweat began pouring down their body. "I don't know." Rue responded so softly, the words almost missed the nearby ear of his conjoined twin brother. Part 2. As the men took in one last glance at their new home on the horizon, Woe affixed his eyesight on the daytime moon, and marvelled at its long striations and patterned impact craters. He wondered if one day a human being could walk its surface, perhaps one day even grow wings and fly to the moon himself. A panoramic view would reveal the new star in the east had grown brighter since they had last seen its shine. They decided they should head back to camp and discuss the discovery with the elders. As the men hustled to rejoin the tribe, they discussed the possibility of what they saw. Not the grazing animals that would feed the camp for generations to come, nor the strange angles of the grass in the fields. The conjoined twins, running on a single pair of legs with the intensity of two men, discussed the reflective dome shape at the centre of the land, situated high upon a hill. They ran with disregard, no longer hiding the impression of their footsteps. The dome shape was so magnificent and alien in its shattered reflectiveness, their theories pertaining to its origination became just as unexplainable. Upon returning to camp, they asked to meet with the elders right away, but there was a horror in the face of every silent tribesperson as they met up with the group. "What's going on? What happened?" Rue screamed as he met 4 camp custodians covered in blood. There was no answer. They kept moving through the group and found 2 more custodians with blood encasing their arms and wrists. "Are you hurt? What happened?" Woe grabbed a man by the shoulders and began shaking him into a heightened awareness. "There was too much blood. We were too late." The mystery persisted. The men moved closer, nearer to an enclosed circle of crying individuals. Upon forcing their way in the circle, assuming the worst, they found the source of the horror. There, lying on a bed of leaves, laid the body of Rave and a small, bloodied mass. The men backed out of the circle and sat down. Woe was light-headed. Rue was enraged. He knew the majesty of their discovery would not be the topic of discussion for which he had hoped. As the men collected themselves, 4 unassigned members of the tribe brought Elder Abigail in her chair near the bodies to share her stoicism. She spoke far more summarily than she would for even an individual burial, and asked to be carried near the fire, closer to her tent. As she was carried past Rue and Woe, she said, loudly as to make sure all could hear her address the men, "Come, tell me about what you found." The sun had set, and the moon shone brighter than usual. The new star now twinkled intensely bright, almost too bright to look at. Elder Abigail, clutching her jade and gold amulet, remembered a story from her youth about a bright star in the east that guided 3 wise men across the land to a crucial birth. Parallels were drawn between this myth, the twins, and herself, but she decided not to share any of this thought out loud. She was far more interested in what the men had to share. "Tell me about what you found." Abigail's words shook through her aged lips. At this point in life, the matriarch of the tribe had skin like plastic and a permanent hunch, not a single hair left on her body. The men, intermittently lit by strobing campfire light, described in great detail the strange, angular shapes of the land that they found, some as large as hundreds of feet wide. They gleefully told the elder about the limitless quantum of animals climbing in and out of rectangular holes in the surfaces of grass. The rushing water of nearby babbling brooks, and the eerie stillness of impossibly straight rivers took some time to faithfully recount, but the preeminent feature in question was the reflective dome structure at the land's centre.
"Ah, yes," croaked Abigail. "I remember those vividly. I'll tell you what you saw. But first, I think it's time you learn about the day it happened. I may be the only person alive who knows about the events of the 21st century, and I've never told a soul about it. As you might have heard in rumours, I was born in the year 1980. I never knew my parents. They gave me away at birth."
"You were part of another tribe?" Rue asked.
There were no tribes or camps at this time. Everything was different. Nothing looked like this. My oldest memories are from when I was a child in the late 1980s. My parents had given me away at birth, but our civilization was vast. We had what we all referred to as an infrastructure, upon which the entire world was built. Paths for travel were permanently affixed to the ground in ways you men could never imagine. We created lakes by hand and cleared land like gods. Before I was even born, we had sent a few human beings off the planet and watched as they flew into the stars. Some never returned. I dreamed of one day being able to visit outer space, to be one of the chosen few who could travel to the moon and study sciences not of this planet.
Woe shivered at this description, as he recalled just recently dreaming of the very same. Abigail continued.
By the 1990s, we had the ability to communicate with people across vast distances, using tools we could speak and write into that were connected to other tools at any point on the earth. Another 15 years, and we could see people who weren't there, inside these tools. It was a strange experiment in communication. Everywhere you could travel in those years had been built up in monolithic fashion. There was not a single province that was not entirely composed of massive, tall, stone, man-made structures used to live and work within. We had no need to hunt. We created food. We thought we held dominion over the earth, and we were foolish. We spent entire generations of human life creating, earning, stealing, and spending money.
"Money?" Rue questioned.
It's a very confusing concept to explain. Here and now we have all of the resources and materials of the earth to use. 300 years ago those same resources existed, but we allowed their access to only a few individuals. The rest of us had a collection of notes, pieces of parchment, used to trade for those materials.
Woe interrupted. "Why not just use the resources for one's needs?"
We decided there were too many people, and we did not have the responsibility to take only what we needed. So people agreed many, many years before even I was born that we required this system to keep things fair for all. But the opposite effect took root. We used this system to keep access to life-giving resources away from each other. This decision underscored thousands of years of humanity. So what you men saw in the fields today was undoubtedly the ruins of that monetary system, the massive domiciles of commercial business and indulgence, buildings toppled over and reclaimed by nature at the behest of our Mother Earth. The still rivers you saw were created by man as routes for effective travel that filled with water over time. If you were to swim to the bottom and clear the underwater vegetation, you could feel the concrete of an abandoned highway. By the time 2035 came around, our people perfected the technology that would become the end of that age of humanity. We used tools of simulation to replicate the human consciousness. A human brain was created in a safe, isolated scientific setting. In one day, one single day of human existence, that lab-created human brain discovered how to create more non-human brains, utilizing far less energy and resources, effectively creating a new race upon the earth. An artificial intelligence revolution began. These non-binaries created the first and subsequently only nanobot computers, the size of a red blood cell, that could travel through the human body and fend off disease. It was only 3 months later that they could suspend the aging process entirely and make humans immortal. I was one of the first to take the upgrade. Despite my being an orphan, I achieved quite a bit in the realm of deep space research. I never travelled to the moon, which I'm thankful for, but this was all only a precursor to it. Something unrelated to the singularity of human consciousness put all the world's advancements on hold, an unforeseen event that destroyed us all.
There was a long pause in Abigail's recollection. The twins were sweating heavily at the point where their 2 necks came together as one, and the 3 were now surrounded by no less than 40 members of the camp, listening quietly.
"The day it happened," resumed Abigail, "began like any other day. People ate breakfast, went to work, and lived as though they held dominion over their own experience. This day in the year 2045 was the last day for coexistent humanity. Religious leaders from all over the world scrambled to explain what they had just seen. Their followers defected. Every religion was destroyed in one moment. The day it happened, geologists formed research panels composed of the world's smartest earth scientists to debate what they saw and what to do. Popular scientists broke down in tears on debate television as they conceded utter defeat in the face of the unexplainable. The day it happened, the generals of all the world's militaries met with lead officials at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. They offered weapons in exchange for immediate access to launch pads and space shuttles. The day it happened, the very moment it happened, widespread looting began in poorly educated communities. That is to say, in one moment, humanity decided their ruling monetary system was no longer needed, and a grand restructuring would soon begin. People collected as many of the remaining goods and prepared foods they could, in an effort to position themselves for lengthy survival while the restructuring took place. The day it happened, and this was the worst, The day it happened, mass suicides began. Mass suicides. Over 1 billion people a day for the first week. This led to a toxic, septic gas release of apocalyptic pollution that drove the rest of us underground, while the Earth's trees worked for 2 decades to purify the breathable oxygen supplies. Very few survived the subterraneous life. I was fortunate to live in a region with one of the Earth's nethermost caverns, and hid the access from the rest of my contemporaries. This is a detail I regret. But we were in survival mode, and when one thinks they may die, one's true self is revealed.
Several silent moments transpired. Abigail leered, unfocused, at the campfire. Family members looked silently into each other's eyes and pulled each other close. Woe and Rue put their heads together gently, as Rue whispered softly with immense bravery, "So, what was it?"
"I'll tell you what it was. But you came to me with a different question altogether."
"The kaleidoscopic dome!" Woe exclaimed in the realization that he himself had forgotten his initial inquiry.
"Yes, the dome. What you were actually looking at, young Rue and Woe, was a mega mirror telescope on the highest point of the city hills. This was an invention of man, perfected hundreds of years prior to my birth. This allows one to see features of our solar system from great distances away, based on very simple alignment of mirrors and lenses. It's most likely still in working order after all these years. I used them daily when I was researching binary star systems in our Milky Way galaxy."
It was at this time, just as Abigail was preparing to reveal the truth of the day it happened, when looking up at the sky would reveal the new star in the east had grown brighter than ever. As if the heavens were conspiring to underscore the campfire tale with an indelible sense of horror, the collective ground and trees surrounding the camp began to buzz and vibrate. Panic set in. The custodians and unassigned began to scramble in search of their children. Abigail, Rue, Woe, and a few brave members of the camp sat unaffected as their matriarchal elder revealed the worst.
"It was the single most shocking event to happen in all recorded history of our 11 dimensions. The event lasted a mere 3.5 seconds. That 3.5-second period was played and replayed in the minds of 9 billion people for the rest of their soon-to-be-expired lives. As many in the Northern Hemisphere gazed sedately at the afternoon moon, serendipity placed its gentle hand upon their shoulders and squeezed piercingly. For at this very moment, this one small moment, a set of elongated, segmented claws, thousands of miles long, emerged tall from behind the moon and extended straight upward. The knobby, shell-plated digits then fell to the surface, almost entirely covering the dusty orb, and gently slid backwards, disappearing to the dark side, never to be seen again.
The midnight sky was now bright as dawn, and everybody listening in affixed their wide-eyed gaze on the glowing night moon, learning and confirming by their own objective eyesight how the moon's massive striations were actually created. The new star lit the pale faces of every tribe member, and they saw the horror in each other's eyes as they now understood that this was no star. It was, in fact, an asteroid hurtling through space toward the Earth's moon. From the moment they made this realization, it took only a mere 3.5 seconds for the collision to take place. A silent violence occurred as the new star struck the dark side of the moon, ejecting a massive dust cloud. All sound of chirping insects and gulping frogs ceased. Everyone held their breath. The hair on everyone's head stood straight up as sticks rose to attention, small rocks levitated, and tree branches lifted upwards. Not a sound was heard apart from the creaking tree branches as their boughs bent in an unnatural configuration. Then they all fell to the ground with a massive boom. Everyone was now screaming and running in circles. The only still members of the encampment were Rue, Woe, and, of course, the stoic Abigail Jesterson.
"Take me to the Mega Mirror Telescope."
Part 3. Rue and Woe lifted Abigail from her earthen chair and began running through night-shaded, pitch-black woods, the volume of screaming diminishing as they advanced rapidly. All of the trees that provided a safe canopy above were now pouring precipitation down on all. Small rocks and sticks could be seen floating all around, as intermittent lightning bursts lit the scene to a phosphorus day-like light every few seconds. The babbling brooks were now strangely floating 10 feet above the soggy beds they once laid upon. The stench of low tide lingered about. With every explosion of thunderous clapping, more and more amphibians fell dead from trees and vines. Rue and Woe had the strength of 2 men and never relented, keeping full stride. Upon glancing back through the occasional clearing of the treetops, they could see the cloud ejected from the moon's surface was now forming a regular orbit around the moon itself. Debris was still floating away into distant space, but the majority of dust was settling into a thick, translucent ring of cloudiness. The forest's edge broke, and there it was, the endless vista of a reclaimed ancient metropolis. With each thunderous crack of lightning, beams of light reflected off the polished surfaces of the Mega Mirror Telescope. Tiny orange dots began blinking on the Earth's fractured sky, likely from moon debris burning up upon attempting to enter the Earth's atmosphere. Again Rue glanced back at the moon and saw several new striations and patterned imprints all over its face. How could this be, he thought, as the impact only hit the unseen surfaces of the moon? As the 3 approached the Mega Mirror Telescope, another sheet of lightning lit up the heavens, and now Woe glanced at the moon's surface only to see a centipede-like creature, a third of the size of the moon itself, scurry across its surface and disappear into the blackness of the orb's unseen side. The horrified triumvirate ascended the metal staircase and entered the unlocked door of the facility, as Abigail began instructing the men on how to calibrate the mirrors to work with the viewfinder of the gargantuan telescope. The moment the hazy moon came into view, they positioned the 300-year-old camp elder in front of the controls so she could dial in the focus necessary to clear the image.
"My God! Mother Earth! Dear Goddess of the Heavens!"
Abigail began screaming and crying, abandoning all stoicism in her being. She looked away from the viewfinder and shook her arms as her mouth locked itself agape with fear. Rue and Woe took turns looking through the telescope at the dust cloud orbiting the looming moon. "What the hell are those massive things?" Rue hollered aloud as Woe pushed his own eyes next into the viewfinder. "My God, it's not dust particles at all. It looks like gigantic lizards."
"They're dinosaurs,"
Abigail sobbed through drool and tears.
"They never went extinct. They never went extinct. They were taken for food. This creature must have been feasting on them for the last 65 million years."
Abigail was losing her coherence as she continued scream-crying.
Look closer. Look at the dust ejected into space."
Rue took control of the viewfinder and immediately began vomiting. Woe glanced for a brief second and began doing the same.
"Do you see?"
squealed Abigail.
"You see what has been kept on the dark side of the moon this whole time, do you? It's human beings. Frozen corpses of human beings, enough bodies to fill several iterations of earthborn civilizations. We must have evolved and have gone extinct at least 7 times as a species for that creature to have harvested that many human beings."
Abigail dropped her head and said softly,
"It will now need to locate new nourishment, to feed again."